besides the personnel changes, what else were the challenges you had in schools?
The big challenge that I saw back then was the whole issue of the curriculum, the material that was being presented to the students. And I think part of it, without a doubt, had to do with my own personal upbringing. I grew up with quality instruction. When I came to the United States, it was then that I came across the concept that there was a belief system that since I was brown and whatever, that I did not belong in an algebra class. I did not belong in a biology class. I think that that concept or that idea kind of permeated the educational system from the instructor's point of view at the time.
For example,
that was the whole
happening?
issue that yes, there were challenges in terms of reading the material, but there are some concepts, some mathematical concepts that can still be taught in order to overcome that reading challenge. The whole issue that the quality of math instruction that was being provided to the kids was by far inferior. They developed a curriculum that would not lead. Lodestar was a math program in which students filled in the answer and they got tested. There was very little instruction. It was pretty much do it on your own and just bring me the paper when you're done and I'll correct it. And if you're correct, I'll pass you on. If you're not correct, we'll send you back to do the program. Instruction was missing. Instruction was missing. Teachers were just managers of paperwork. And the paperwork that was being produced by the students, and students were, since they were not being taught anything, generally speaking, in my experiences as I talked with them about disciplinary issues that were emergent as a consequence of that curriculum, is that they were bored and they were not being taught. Teachers' instructional ability was not being challenged.
What about in other subject areas? How did it look besides math?
I think that the whole issue of the tracking, and it came down to the sciences. It came down to reading. In particular, in the case of reading, if you were deficient, there was the quality of the reading material that was provided to the student was just inferior. It was
too basic.
Were there any
yeah.
names of programs at that time that you can tell me about?
Well, in math was a Lodestar. In science, I think it might have been called the same kind of concept. I forget what it was. And reading, I mean, we tracked kids by levels, reading 1, reading 2, reading 3. And the kids never got to a curriculum that was challenging, that would lead them to be motivated enough to say, okay, I can make it in the college or can aspire.
The concept of getting an English, physics, or chemistry 1, they can't read it. They can't follow it. So there's a disconnect. And the measure for success is that they have to bring up their skiing level, their reading levels, but that also has to be made an exciting course. What we offered, the district curriculum, and we say the district curriculum because you got to follow that, is that they had remedial classes almost in everything. And those probably represented 20 or 40%, up to 20% or 40% of the curriculum in science. In English, they were the lowest level of classes because they simply couldn't read. And yet at that point, the challenge is how do you make reading exciting to a 16-year-old kid reading at the 4th grade level?
What?
They remained, you had to follow the district curriculum. Okay. They had to put the time in the sequence. We provided through Title I reading classes, but a student could end up spending all his time in reading classes and never once really touch the first levels.
One of the things that I always try to work with not only with teachers, as a matter of fact, I was called on it, was the fact that I would tell the teachers that the quality of the instruction was poor, and that therefore I understood why the kid was having difficulty and why he was bored. And I was called before not John, but another principal, Guy Clickard, and he called me in and he says, teachers are complaining, or actually the department chair, Frank Burrows, was complaining that I was undermining the math curriculum, and so I explained to him as to what my belief system was and what I saw. And his response was, keep on doing what you're doing. And so
What did that mean?
I'm trying to convince them that they were capable of doing more than what they were doing, and talking about the fact that the curriculum had to be improved, they had to be changed, they had to be relevant. That kind of an idea.
You were an administrator in the 1970s. What advice do you have to a brand-new principal as she or he takes over a school? What should they be doing in their first 3 or 4 years?
I think on the first year, thanks to advanced technology, I would ensure that they had access to every student that enters that high school, that ahead of time, the summer before enrollment of the freshman class, you have names and the student achievement or student reading levels for every student, their attendance. In other words, you'd come up with a statistical profile of each student that's coming in. And based on that information, then you would move to what your staff could best be used or assigned to meet the needs of these students. And you're going to end up with profiles in which 10 or 15%, I'm thinking of the East Side and those years you're describing back in the 70s, that were on grade level. And so they're going to go on. But the vast challenge becomes the students that are reading before grade level. And some of them might have programs that can meet their needs easily once you know who the student is. Otherwise, you're going to throw them in a mass group and you're meeting the needs of the average, where some of the students are quite bright and they've missed out somewhere along the road. Some of it is a language barrier if they're recent immigrants, and that's been demonstrated time and time again with foreign students.
What else would you do in the first few
Then
years?
I would try to have a connect with a local college, in our case, San Jose State Teachers Education, a closer tie with them in terms of how they train teachers to meet those challenges that the district as a whole needs, so that teachers that were hired then feel comfortable in teaching this type of student, challenging students as they are. And then that the state curriculum testing is a little more realistic in terms of testing these students at their appropriate levels. And parent involvement, how do you get parents, we know they're not going to, especially in these hard economic times, that some parents have 2 jobs, low-paying jobs to be sure in some cases, but how do you get them, better connection? Phones is certainly one way of doing it. Computers and iPads, maybe that parents can have access to. Some of the schools now are requiring that all students have or are given. Foundations donate computers to students. So it might be possible to make that connect where a counselor can talk to a parent on the screen, to be sure, at home, and say, can I take 5 minutes of your time? I want to review this with you. And do that in a consistent way. And it's a hard task. I'm not saying it's an easy task for teachers or counselors to do that. But there has to be that connect where the teachers have the time to call parents in the evening, where the prep period that teachers have is spent more productively than it is now.
Mr. Renteria, if you were advising a brand new principal of a high school, what advice would you give her or him regarding what they might do in the first few years of their principalship?
Again, I'm a strong believer in the concept of access. And so by that I mean that the curriculum has to be quality, but along with the curriculum there has to be an instruction that goes hand in hand. And with that, You have to work at developing a belief system that the students that you're charged with to educate, that they are capable of learning, that they can learn. That of course has a lot of issues that need to be addressed in all aspects, but that would probably, in the synthesis, would be the crux of my message to any new administrator or principal.
How would you suggest they work with families?
Well, parents, families have to be an integral part of the learning process. They need to be actively involved just by following up with the progress of the student, always being aware of where the student is or is not getting to, and that parents get involved with the teachers and administrators to make sure that their children are having access to that quality instruction. And that means being in touch on an ongoing basis, whether you use technology or good old style telephone or visit to the school, but that contact has to be there.